I'm going to show 5 methods that you can create a table inside Power Query, either by loading a named range in Excel or table, or actually creating the table inside Power Query. The first method is to load a single cell, which for instance I can just do like this. So I have a table here with salespeople and the day that they made a sale, and I want to say that I want to filter my table based on one value. So here I'll just say Monday, and then I make this a named range by typing up here saying filter value, and then I can go into data and say from table, and this will then be a named range which I can refer to. So first we need to remove these steps, and then my source is simply going to be excel.currentworkbook, where I grab the name filter value and I grab the content from it, which is just one value. Then I right click and say drill down, which gives me a single value, and I can then use this as a normal filter. So now I just need to load the actual salespeople table. So here I'll just add a normal filter to the day column, and then afterwards I'll change this value where it says day equals to Friday. I can change that to the name of my query, which over here is filter value. So now I'm filtering on whatever value you have in here. So when I then say close and load to, I can just say existing worksheet, and that should be F4. And now I just get the Monday, and then if I change this to Tuesday, that will update automatically. The second option is to create a full table. So this is if you need to filter on multiple values, and you'd normally put this in a background sheet. So this is easy for the user to change. So I'll just say Monday and Wednesday, just to have 2 options. So the good thing about this method is that you can have multiple values to filter on, whereas with this named range version, I'm only allowing the user to change one value. You could have multiple values in a named range, so I could make J4 and J5 be something else, values, but I think it's more intuitive for the user if you need to filter on multiple values to have it in a table. So as before, I'll load this from table and call this filter table. And now I have 2 options, and I'm going to show option 1 on how to filter, which is using merge, because this method is a little more intuitive. So right now I'll add a new step that just refers to the change type table. So this is before we did any manipulations, any filtering. So here I can just go to merge queries and say I want to do a merge based on the day column. And I want to do that to the filter table, the days, but I don't want to do a left outer join, which will give me all the rows of the original table. And then where I have Monday or Wednesday in the day column, I'll get that value. But since I need to filter, I can change the join type to be an inner join, which means that I'll only get the 11 rows where the value in the day column is equal to Monday or Wednesday. And as before, whenever I change the values in the filter table, the table will be filtered on the new values. So now I've already removed those rows, and then I can just remove this merged column because I don't actually need to know that it's Monday. So now, since my query will always print the last step, I'll be printing the table where I filtered on the values in this column, this table. So now I can change that to Thursday and go back and update my query, and it will now filter on Monday and Thursday. The second option we can do with this method of loading. Yeah, now it's mad because I have a firewall error, so I'll do that off screen. My solution was that I'm simply in this step here, custom 1, I'm just referring to the change type step, and then in merge queries before I was referencing the custom 1 table, but that's referencing the change type step. So if I just remove this custom 1 step and then in merge queries, I'm referring directly to change type, then Power Query is okay. So I think the problem is I was referring to a step which refers to another step, and Power Query didn't like that. So by just referring directly to change type, it's okay. So that was a bit of a sidestep. So what I was saying was there's another way to do this without doing a merge, which is if I just copy this query and then I use I convert this into a list by going into transform and saying convert to list. And a list is just a one-dimensional array, which in normal language means it's a table with one column. So the column actually, the header doesn't mean anything. It's just two values basically. In Python, this is what a regular list is. So now in the salespeople table, I can do so now here I can just add a new column where I want to use the function of List.Contains. And in SQL language, this is basically the way to do an in operation. So I'm saying I want only the rows where I can find the Dave column value inside my query filter table 2. And actually I'm just going to change the name of that because that would be confusing. And then I can just copy that for ease. So in salespeople, I'm going to add a column where I use the List.Contains function. And then the list I'm referring to is the List.Contains. And because I don't have any spaces, I don't need to use the hashtag quotation mark syntax. So I want to look into this list and I want to use the day column to do so. And then I can just say OK. And then this will give me true, false. And because I need to refer to the correct table, because right now I'm referring to the removed columns table where I already did my filtering. So if I just change this into change type, then you will see I get the exact same once I filter out the false values. So these two tables should be exactly the same, except I now have this extra column which I need to delete. So it's really up to you if you want to do a merge or if you want to do List.Contains. It's probably easier to do a merge because you can just use the GUI to help you. You just click the button basically. This makes a little more intuitive sense, and when you look here at the join, you can see how many rows are affected. So I think this would be a better version, but you can use the List.Contains if you really want to. The next three methods are ways to make a query, a table inside Power Query by making a new query. So this is a method you might want to use if you don't want your user to change anything. So if you have a filter step where you know that you need to filter on something, you need to filter on multiple values, you could do an if and say if the value is equal to Monday or the value is equal to Tuesday, but that gets confusing, especially if you have a lot of values to filter on. So you might want to do the merge or List.Contains method, but you want to make it a table because it's easier to read. And again, you don't want your user to change this for whatever reason. So here is the Table.FromRecords method, which creates a table. And the nice thing about this method is you don't have to do this as a new query. You can do this as an intermediate step, which I'll show right after this works. So the syntax is a bit weird. It's a function, so you need to have an open parentheses and a close parentheses. And then the Table.FromRecords takes as an argument a record, which is the curly brackets. So we do open curly and close curly. And then it takes multiple records, so plural. And then what it actually takes as an argument is the square bracket, which would be a list. So each row in this table has to be within the square brackets. And the name of the column doesn't have to be in quotation marks because we're inside the square brackets. So you also normally use square brackets when you refer to columns. So I'm just going to make the name of the column be day and say that's equal to Monday, which is a text string, so that's in quotation marks. And then if I just close this, I have a table. And if I want multiple rows, I need the comma. So I can just say day equal to Friday. and close. And then you don't need a comma on the last step or it's going to get mad at you because it doesn't make sense. So now we have a table with just 2 values and you can keep adding more and more. And if you want multiple columns, you just need to have a comma inside the square bracket. So this could be called today. And then what's important is that you need to have the same number of columns for each list. So here it's just going to give me an error because it can't find the column header today. So you need to be a bit careful. That's also why I did this whole empty lines and you have the curly bracket and parentheses on the same line just to make it easier. Because this can be confusing to read. So now we have a table with 2 columns. And just as before, I can use both merge and List.Contains in order to filter on this, so I won't show that. But I will show that you can do this as an intermediate step. So I've showed before that when you make a new step, you don't have to refer to the last step. You can just type in this intermediate step, which makes this table. And then if we just copy this merge queries to a new table, to a new step, I can say I want to take the table from change type and use the day column. Actually, I need to move that down to the bottom. Here in custom 1, I created the table. So when I do my merge, you can't see that in here in my available tables because it only looks at my queries. But if I go in here and change the name here from filter table, I can change that to be custom 1. And now it's doing a join to custom 1. And it can find Monday and it can find Thursday because we're doing the inner join. And just as before, you can delete this table column because we don't need it. So if you want it as an intermediate step, you might want that if you have many queries and you only need to do it once. But it's probably a bit too confusing to have it like this. You probably want it out here where it's easier to change. Yeah, so you can do that with both merge and List.Contains. And then for the second last version, I can't do that in my version of Excel. There's supposed to be an option here under new query in the home tab where I can add data, but I can do it in Power BI. So I'll show that here. I just made a new Power BI report and I click on get data and blank query. And then in here, there is just a button called enter data where we can make a table just from scratch. So like before, I'll just write Tuesday and Thursday. This is a lot more intuitive and easy to use. So if you can do this, if you have access to a more recent version of Excel than I have. And the syntax is a bit annoying, but you really don't have to worry about that because you don't need to understand that. You just need to click the button and type in whatever you want the column header to be and the rows to be. So that was very easy to do. The last method I'll show is the hashtag table function, which I would recommend not doing when you have these other methods available, but I will show it. So the way it works is you simply type in equal hashtag table. And because this is a function, you open with parentheses and close. The way it works is you first need to feed it the column headers, which you do in curly brackets. So I'll just add day. And then you have a comma. And then on the next row, and here's where it gets confusing, this takes a series of series. So you have to have an open curly bracket and a closed curly bracket. And then everything inside here will be a row. So if I'll just add one quickly to show it, then we get one single value with a column header of day. So this isn't a list, and that's why we need column headers. And then each time you want to add a row, you need to add a comma to the last row, and then add a new row. Again, we can just say Wednesday, and close curly brackets. And this gives us 2 values. And I find it confusing because you need to have the column header in one set of curly brackets, but you need each row to have this outer curly bracket and then also its own curly brackets. So really it takes a list, it takes a series of series, and that's why I find it confusing. So I would recommend against using it. And just to show one last way to do this method, even though I don't recommend it, instead of typing it in here as a function, you can also go to Advanced Editor, delete everything inside and just copy paste this without the equal in the beginning. And you might want to do this if you think it's easier in here in the Advanced Editor, because you have so many options.